Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR, brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Appreciate everybody. Certainly a lot of action here this week over at the OBR. Certainly not the way we anticipated it, but the news of Cyclo, of course, comes of its own. We'll get to, Pete's thoughts here, a little bit about Myles Garrett. Do want to talk a little bit, certainly, about the quarterbacks. And, of course, it's been kind of swept under the rug a little bit, but they were going to play a Super Bowl on Sunday. So appreciate everybody. Make sure you, of course, are subscribed over on YouTube, over on Twitch. Make sure you took advantage on Wednesday. You had the basically green-lit VIP access to the OBR, and I hope for some of you that really turned into something where you realized that was something that you needed in your life. Like I said, Pete Smith is here. So, Pete, the news dropped Monday, and, it aggravated me that it dropped Monday, but I understand the reason it dropped Monday. There was going to be no, obviously, Super Bowl, media blitz that they could have done if they had dropped the news, say the day after the Super Bowl. I talked about it yesterday at length, and I just think the more it goes on, and kind of looking at the factuality things here with the Browns, number one, first off, back in the draft game for the first time in 3 seasons, possessing the number 2 overall pick, the ability to create another $89 million in salary cap space, if that is something they choose to do, and then, of course, for the fact that they are getting this second life, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, it's hard to see the path where, if you're getting this second opportunity, the first move you're going to make is basically trading away Myles Garrett, which basically mitigates all the good things you have going for you right now.
Yeah, look, strategy-wise, the timing makes all the sense in the world. They were going to go on Radio Row and talk, so they set the storyline for Myles Garrett. So be it. But from the Browns standpoint, Jack Duffin's covered this really well, but the Browns are fiscally better off to keep Myles Garrett than they are to trade him. In other words, and Jason from Over the Cap really put it well.
When you can put names to it and numbers to it, it really makes you understand, yeah.
If the Browns trade Myles Garrett, they become the New Orleans Saints, which the Browns have been accused of for the past 5 years, even though they keep, since Deshaun Watson got here, which they kept adding and adding and adding, despite the fact everybody said they couldn't. This would be the move that would actually make them into the Saints and potentially send them into a downward spiral where 25 and 26 are like 2016 and 2017 with a little bit more talent. But nevertheless, you are basically dead for 2 years. So the Browns have no interest in that. And that's where we're at. And Myles Garrett acknowledged the fact he has no leverage. He's telling you flat out, I have no leverage. I don't have much control where I go. I'm just hoping, it all works out. And, with everything that we've learned, which sort of conflicts with some of the reporting that's been out there, just on the timeline of how long this has been going on and everything else, this, from just the hard knocks, which seemingly poured a bucket of cold water on the whole thing. And then now we're not even a month. And now I'm making my stand and whatever else. And it's how much of this is agent speak is to be determined. You and I have been at this a long time. We've seen this thing happen before. We've seen some agents rise and fall on this type of stuff. So there's always that element. How much, I think Myles is a very intelligent person, but there have been times where even smart people let agents sort of take over, and then, they try to sort of let them drive the bus and then come to regret it later. And we'll see if that happens. I don't know if it will, but this is where we are. And nothing can happen for about 5 weeks because the league year starts March 12th. And even then, if they want to go this route, it's probably going to take till June. So yes, 4 months. Enjoy.
Well, and the thing, and this is where I think, some of the reporting has been certainly all over the place. And look, some of it is done. Look, at the end of the day, you're supposed to have people read your piece and as many people as possible. So I think that's why you get so many things. And then it's like, oh, okay, I guess you didn't, once the print got smaller at the end of the article, maybe you saw like the logistic issues here or whatever. But, oh, well, the Browns met with Myles Garrett and they told him that they didn't feel that there was any way they could compete for the next 2 years. The conversation then would have been, Myles, we don't think we can compete for the next 2 years. So we're going to trade you. There's no reason, if it's over, you're not going to say, hey, Myles, stick around here. And then hopefully at 31, you'll become more athletic, better than you were at 21. And then we've got everybody right where we got them. If they truly felt with $89 million in cap space, 12 draft choices, the number 2 overall pick, the ability to essentially pay anybody in the free agent market they want to, I'm not saying Sam Darnold is the be-all, end-all, but if you think he's the belle of the ball of the available quarterbacks, there's nothing stopping them from making that happen. It just doesn't, because they're not, everybody thinks they're dumb, which, whatever. They've made mistakes. They've had misses, yes. But the point would have been, if we stink and we're going to stink, I'm going to do what would you do in any situation, any business, whatever. You're going to try to move your best commodity. And that would be, well, now, guess what? Now the plan's really going to work because they would have told him they were going to move on from him, not the other way around.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that make this whole dynamic sort of interesting. Is that one of the teams he kept talking about was Washington, and Jaden Daniels is phenomenal. Like, take nothing away from him. It's not about him. But the Washington Commanders were where the Browns were last year, but in way worse position. And one offseason later, now they're great because they got a quarterback. And I'm not going to pretend that any of the quarterbacks I've evaluated suggest to me that Jaden Daniels or that there's going to be a Jaden Daniels like player.
Yes.
What I am suggesting, and we see this all the time, and I would point to the Philadelphia Eagles who have won 4 games twice in the past decade. The league changes fast if you do smart things. So I am sympathetic to Myles' position, which is, look, man, I don't see this getting better. And I don't think he's old. I think he could end up playing like 6 more years, eight more years, just because there are so few people genetically like that. But I can see where he would come to this point where he's sort of like, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this at this level. Maybe I get hit by a bus. Maybe I just get a significant injury. I've been fortunate so far, and I want to, do my best and all this. The other aspect, which maybe they're already starting to figure out, public perception, especially on a national stage for the Browns, isn't getting any lower. So Myles Garrett, meanwhile, his perception is way up here. Everybody thinks he's a great, great, great player and all these other things. The more he talks, the more there is a risk for him to drop himself down. The Browns are not going to go anywhere. And he can shovel dirt on them, more or less. But everybody already thinks like that they're a bottom franchise, even if they aren't. So he's not going to win sort of a PR battle in that. All he can do is hurt himself. And we already saw that. And for people who watch the React, I told you this was coming. He couldn't wait. It didn't even take basically 12 hours before LeBron James' name come out. And now there are a whole bunch of people who old wounds have now surfaced, and they're now remembering how much they hated how LeBron left twice. And there's this sense that LeBron James is at least somewhat involved with potentially trying to rip another guy out of Cleveland. And now, and I've seen this also with some national shows. We talked about one on our show, was people are going to, not only based on the comment and the way he wrote the note, which is to say Andrew Berry's name is not on it. Cleveland is. And there will come a point, and I think we're already going to start to see it, where Cleveland and people in Cleveland and fans in Cleveland are more than happy to be angry at the Browns, and warranted for the Deshaun Watson fiasco. It's completely warranted. It was a disaster. And from the jump, the idea of doing it was stupid. However, and I think Myles is aware of this, and I think he tried to lower the temperature on it, but national talking heads don't care. They're going to go and get their ratings, which is to trash Cleveland. And that is going to sort of work against Myles Garrett in the sense that after a while, people hate hearing that stuff and they start getting a little bit chesty. And I've already seen a whole lot of people, and there were people who were doing this before this whole thing came up. if he doesn't want to be here, Cleveland doesn't need him type stuff. And there are going to be people who get angry and angry about that and just sort of like feel this isn't about Myles Garrett and the Browns anymore. Now it becomes Myles Garrett versus Cleveland, and he will not win. And that is something where Cleveland can carry a grudge like no other. And part of the reason these shows pick on Cleveland, both radio and TV, is because they know Cleveland fans will they will interact, they will react, and they will do exactly what those hosts want them to do. But like that doesn't help Myles at all. So, and that's not to say there's one really awkward situation coming up right here, which is obviously for people who follow the Cavs, they make this big trade. They're already ahead of the playoffs. Myles Garrett's a part owner, and however small fraction you want to see, he likes sitting courtside. If this gets ugly, how is it going to go when they get to the playoffs and he's a 7-game series and he wants to sit front, courtside? He may have to go start watching the game from a box.
The tunnel.
because this is a dynamic he has to deal with. That all of these things sort of work against them. And I get it, right? There's this whole I have no doubt that Myles Garrett loves the fact that everybody's fawning over him.
Of course.
Throwing everything at him. He's getting recruited all over again. But, it's interesting that LeBron has talked to him, and then how true it is or not. He came out. He's still trying to rehab his own image in Cleveland, where he came out with this article talking about he cried in some dude's driveway over going to Miami and how he regretted it. Well, these are all things that are going to come up through this whole process. And again, 4 months.
Well, and the thing with all of this, though, and it certainly goes along with your point is, the Cleveland sports fandom, everything. The Guardians suck, Cavaliers suck, Browns suck. Somebody else tries to say, well, Cleveland sucks, and then all of a sudden, the individual hatred becomes group mentality. And no, you are not allowed to say that. We can say it, but you cannot. And this is where it is going to be a fine line, certainly for Myles. And, I'm sure after 8 seasons, he's not oblivious to this. He's not. But, sometimes, you reap what you sow here. And, at the end of the day where, and I still think the way this all turns out probably is Myles Garrett is signing a contract to become the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. And then it's going to be, okay, let's bring our dogs to the dog park again. What's everybody streaming? Because I'm going to throw a watch party. And now basically, some self-inflicted damage I'm going to have to go and correct. But we do got to get, obviously, to one thing real quick here. We will continue around. We've been talking all week, and obviously, very, very thankful for great folks over at State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights. If you are local to the Cleveland area, they are your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns, not cutting your grass. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential commercial equipment for Toro, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you are looking for a new, dependable time cutter, zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. They are veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders. They are lifetime Browns fans, so don't pick on the Browns in front of them. And they are proud supporters of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. And for Myles, might want to check it out because this keeps up. You're going to need something to clean up the lawn because there could be something getting thrown your way. But again, I think at the end of the day, it ends up being much ado about nothing. Because the other thing is, look, it's the proper thing to say, oh, I don't really care about the money, which is, I have tons of it and I can say it, but it doesn't mean I don't care about the money. And, to go to one of these teams, the Buffaloes, the Eagles, the contract extension from Cleveland would be exponentially more because they will pay the tax for the 8 years. They will pay the tax that, we haven't gotten where we were hoping to go. It's not going to be that way everywhere else, but you got to be careful for the ditches you supposedly dig.
Well, I mean, there's absolutely a scenario where Myles can come out of this looking like a hero. I mean,
they'll fan quickly. Yes.
Well, I mean, there's that, but it's also like Because originally when the whole press conference happened, there was this element where like Myles Garrett could position himself both as the leader of the team and, everything else as sort of the voice of the collective fan and say, we got to knock this crap off. Like, you wasted all this time and money and draft picks on everything else on Deshaun Watson. Like, what are we doing here? And at the moment, there were a whole lot of people like, yeah, we're excited about this. And like, I completely understood it. Like, that was sort of a fans can boo and go protest in front of an empty building miles away from where the people actually work. But Myles Garrett can actually sit down with the guy who's paying, signing the checks, and he has to listen to him. And there's this element where Myles can affect change within that organization, give himself a seat at the table, whatever, and he can voice these things. And if like they come to an agreement on this, and this would have to be relatively soon, but it almost doesn't matter. If they come to an agreement and Myles is like, he can come out and say, look, we came to this arrangement. We're going to get this thing figured out. Ownership is listening to you, to me, whatever. And people will absolutely love him for it. This is no different than like, and the comparison I keep coming back to is Lamar Jackson in 2023, which was knockout, drag out, ugly between the Ravens management and Lamar Jackson. At one point, they insinuated he was a child. And all these other things. And people in Baltimore were absolutely convinced he was gone. And now another MVP later and arguably more first place votes than the other guy could have had his second. And I don't know how many people even remember how acrimonious that negotiation was. But Lamar Jackson's a Raven for life or whatever, and we move on. And that is what can happen for Myles Garrett if he wants it to go that route.
Look, there was a certain large amount of this fan base that would have absolutely forgotten everything that number 4 did previously before he got here. If he had played well, I will tell you right now, there would have been Watson jerseys everywhere. Fandom is a crazy thing. It'll make you sometimes sell your soul, essentially. So however, this works out, and I've given you my feelings on that. But Pete, quarterback-wise here, look, I think we both agree, there's going to be something done in the veteran market. The Myles domino, obviously, until it is told to us one way or the other, I just think more and more draft-wise, and I know I'm not going to do it. I know you wouldn't do it. I know there's a lot of us that wouldn't do it. But I have to think there is something to we don't think we'll ever be at 2 again. So do we have to roll the dice on one of these guys? I mean, look, almost all of them are a dice roll anyway. At 2, obviously, it becomes a major dice roll because basically you're playing with every ounce of money you have, essentially. But it just feels like it might be, in their eyes, the opportunity to have the say in what they get might be greater than the fact they may not totally be enamored with the selection they would make, so to speak.
It's difficult for me to square the idea that the Browns are never going to be here again with the people who also think the Browns are never going to win again. So it can't be both. They're either going to be good enough that they're not going to be picking 2 again, or they are going to be
picking 2 every year.
Yeah, I mean, so there's that aspect of it. And then what I would look at is the teams that the Browns aspire to be. The Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens in terms of how they got their quarterback. Like, yes, ultimately you'd really like to be Washington, where you just pick a guy and miraculously he's already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But in terms of the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens, they all took a quarterback that the some element of Browns fandom wanted. They did it from a position where I don't think a single one of those teams had a losing record the year they drafted them. They traded up, and then they took the time because all these guys were developmental. They all had a plan. They all had coaching, things stay in place, and that consistency allowed them to succeed. What I would warn people, or I'll ask you, what is one of the biggest mistakes that teams make when they pick a quarterback early in the draft?
Well, it's usually not having either the weapons around him or the offensive line around him.
So I would say one of the things the teams do screw it up, and the Browns did this, is they fire their coach the second they pick the guy. The Bears did it twice. The Bears took Justin Fields, and by the way, here's another argument for that. Justin Fields goes to the Bears. The Denver Broncos passed when everybody thought he was going to take they were going to take Justin Fields. They took Patrick Surtain II, who just won Defensive Player of the Year.
It worked out pretty well.
And then they take Caleb Williams this last year, and then they fired the coach again. And I'm not even arguing that Eberflus didn't need to go, but and Ben Johnson may be a great hire, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're already on coach 2 and you're changing systems, and we do this whole thing. And Baker Mayfield has never had the same guy twice in a row. He's one of the most miraculous guys in the league in terms of this. He makes Alex Smith look like boring in terms of that. But you want, if you're looking at this and rolling the dice, let's say gun to your head, you had to take a quarterback, you would still want them to have a consistent situation in place. In other words, and this is more to Jimmy Haslam than anybody, he has to make the decision. I think it's safe to say that Kevin Stefanski is not Hugh Jackson. He's not Matt Eberflus. I think he has to make the decision whether it's this year or if they want to wait and do it a year from now, where he has to be very honest with himself and say, okay, we're drafting the quarterback. I'm not going to mess with this thing. Kevin Stefanski is going to be here for the next 2 to 3 years to make sure this is going to work, because I don't want to draft a quarterback and then immediately fire the coach. And now he's learning a second system and potentially a third system and all these things that are going to hold him back. So even if you're sort of looking at this and going, it's a roll of the dice and it's up to the organization to make it work, you should be pressuring the organization not to blow the thing up when you've just taken the quarterback. So if they don't go big this year and they wait till next year, Jimmy Haslam, regardless of the record or anything else, has to have a very honest conversation with himself or whoever else and say, can I stick with these guys for then another couple years, because I don't want to do anything that's going to screw up the quarterback, because that's the whole thing. Everybody this is the argument. The quarterback's the whole thing. Well, if the quarterback's the whole thing, then you have to stick to your guns and give him consistency in the best possible situation to succeed. And the best possible situation to succeed is not firing your coach constantly and changing systems, as illustrated by Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen.
Very good points. Very good points. So we will see the way, obviously, certainly plenty of time to go here. We do have a Super Bowl Sunday. Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles. Chiefs looking to pull off the historic first time ever three-peat. Eagles, I think, Pete, there's a really good chance this can be a ball game. And I will give you credit here, because I think kind of how you've been riding the Eagles' path to success here throughout the playoffs is what I think could be the ultimate difference maker Sunday. Is Saquon Barkley is just on an absolute heater of a season, and what he is doing is just absolutely incredible. Gets the extra week here of rest. Certainly everybody does, but when you're already beating up on everybody anyway, and the amount of wear and tear that Saquon's been through this year, it may aid him well. But for me, I have to think number 26 in green is the key player to this game, because if he's doing what he's been doing to this point, it's going to be really, really hard when Patrick is spectating most of the time. And then the Chiefs, who they make mistakes. They get a couple of turnovers. They take sacks they shouldn't. In a game where it could be really tight, they can't afford, to have a mishap.
So much of this comes down to the fact that Chiefs are really good in terms of coaching, and having Steve Spagnuolo be so good at this gives them a major advantage. If they can either limit Saquon Barkley and put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hand and come up with they come with creative blitz pressures, which forces the quarterback to hold the ball and all this other stuff. And Jalen Hurts was phenomenal in the NFC Championship game. But if he makes mistakes, he can quickly become arguably the weakest link on the team, just with how everything works. If they're taking Saquon Barkley away and he's got to make throws and he makes a mistake or takes bad sacks or whatever, that becomes a huge tipping point for this game. And that's where it's really troubling. And while Philadelphia's talent is immense, that little bit of difference in I think the Eagles could come up big in terms of coaching, but I don't think anyone's going to question that Andy Reid is a little bit better than Kellen Moore, and that Steve Spagnuolo is a little bit better than what the Eagles are bringing coaching wise to the table on the other side of the ball.
So, and I think, for the Chiefs, it's kind of been, the scenario where, they find something that's working with, one of the wide receivers. And it's weird because it seems like the Chiefs have a dozen of them. Certainly the first round pick, Worthy, has been everything that the Chiefs could have hoped for. You always kind of look for maybe an unsung hero in a Super Bowl, somebody that somebody might not be talking about. And you'd have to think with Worthy and the attention that's brought to him, maybe it's somebody who can kind of do things like him, but is not necessarily going to get the attention, which makes me think like a guy like Hollywood Brown. And there might even be some people who realize that he's not even really back in playing with Kansas City. But there could be a scenario for somebody, and it always seems in the Super Bowl, there's somebody that comes out of nowhere. But for me, I think it could be a guy like Hollywood Brown, could maybe become a little bit of an X factor here. Because if you're Philly, you know what Worthy is, and that can't be the bullet that essentially beats you.
Sure. I mean, and Travis Kelce and all these other guys like, Zach.
It seems sometimes like they have 15 people on the field. That's the one thing nobody ever complains about with the Chiefs. They want to come up with everything, but it seems like they have 15 players on offense on the field at one time.
So there's always a guy that could potentially become a weakness, or it really just comes down to, I think the Chiefs are really good. Obviously their screen game is phenomenal, but they're also good at finding the problematic piece on the opposing team, whatever their weakness is, and getting whatever playmaker they need there to exploit. And I think that's ultimately going to be a big part of this. The concerning thing, I think, from the Chiefs' standpoint is run game. If the Eagles can really take away run game, I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be in just hell. Look, I give Joe Thuney all the credit in the world. Phenomenal teammate. But I worry about that left side with him at tackle and then Caliendo at guard. Because just the amount of guys that the Eagles can throw at them, and I would be shocked if Jalen Carter is not parked right over Caliendo. And they don't do things with Nolan Smith and some of the other guys.
Well, but even still, if you put Carter there and you put Nolan Smith with his 4.39, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, right, really, if you're the Chiefs offensive line, what are you going to do? There is no matchup for that. Edges are not supposed to run sub 4.4.
And that makes it difficult for a guy who wants to hold onto the ball and sort of see how the field's going. Where Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and some of the other defenders that the Eagles have and are just too fast. I mean, I don't think it's a question. I think the Eagles have more talent than the Chiefs do. It's just a question of how much just the coaching expertise. And then the other element that the Chiefs have proven time and time again, they are so experienced and trained for the big moment in the way that other teams have fallen apart. Houston fell apart when the Chiefs are, we always complain about this with the Browns, watching the Steelers watch other teams beat themselves against the Steelers. Nobody does that better than the Chiefs. And is there going to be a point where the Eagles have a big situation and they just aren't up for it yet? And that's sort of the question. And that's where I worry about guys like Jalen Hurts, but they've got rookies on defense that are being asked to do big boy jobs. And I that's where I worry for the Eagles, even though I think they have better talent.
Well, with all this being said, then, Mr. Smith, there has to be a selection made. Who wears the crown Sunday evening?
Well, you made such a compelling case before we started taping the show that I'm going with whoever you pick.
There is, of course, in this scenario, no way I can top Mr. Smith in this scenario. I don't know. I mean, and I'll tell you right now, if I am the Eagles, that play sheet is going to say right at the top, Saquon gets his touches. Because I don't know if there's a number that I'm not okay with giving him, because I think he tremendously is the difference. So if you want to say Saquon's got to get 27 carries because you think that's going to be the ultimate difference, that's the case. And I don't know. It's so hard to – and I think this is why everybody's just aggravated with the Chiefs because, like they're tired of it. Me, it's more of a – like I'm kind of appreciating the greatness. And eventually something's going to happen and it's going to fall apart. I keep trying to talk myself into the Eagles, and then it's the realization of, well, what has ever happened that Kansas City can't counteract? Oh, is it 12 seconds? Josh Allen scored on him. 15. I mean, what is the scenario that you say, that's it? Forget it. Don't even bother pulling out the crash card. Kansas City's dead. And they just, again, always find a way to come back. What the hell? If they stick to my plan, I think the Philadelphia Eagles should win this game. If they stick to my plan, the question is, do they get forced out of it? But if the Philadelphia Eagles are smart, they know what their path to victory is. The Philadelphia Eagles can 110% absolutely beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. And for the sporting sake of it, I'll say the Chiefs. I worry about Jalen Hurts.
See, and that's also part of my premises. I don't want to live in a world where it's Jalen Hurts going against Patrick Mahomes. And that was the weird thing about the AFC Championship game for me. As the game was getting more and more crucial and late in the game, why are we all running the ball so much? This is supposed to be Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. What are all the, let Josh Allen win the game with his arm. His legs were always good, that's fine or whatever, but we're in crucial stages here. And congratulations to Josh Allen, because I honestly didn't think, numbers-wise, he was going to get it this year. I didn't think because Lamar's numbers were so off the rails. But then again, if you also look at what Josh Allen was working with, that is probably why he ended up winning it. Another story, certainly another day. And that's the part that aggravated me with the AFC Championship game. But also, if I'm the Eagles, and that's part of making sure that Saquon gets these amount of touches, I'm not going Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes and, the first one to 375 and 3 scores is going to be the winner. That's just insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of you that just thinks they should just basically read every play, and either Saquon's running it or Jalen Hurts is running it. And with like almost passing
slipping a pop pass.
Yeah, I mean, basically, and that's the thing. Like, that's why I'm worried about Jalen Hurts, because they have great weapons. They have great weapons. Like AJ Brown is phenomenal. Devontae Smith hasn't been a huge factor in the playoffs, but is just a great wide receiver. And then you have talented tight end options there. So I still lean towards it. And that's one of the other things I'm curious about with this whole Myles Garrett thing is if the Chiefs win again, does it almost like sort of fuel this element of, man, I'm boned anyway. The Chiefs, it's not. It refused to leave Kansas City. I think Philadelphia winning it is more interesting personally, just because they're going to have to be a little bit more out of the box. I think a little bit in terms of how they win, because I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to just win a straight drop back game. But again, I think they have more than enough talent to get it done. A massive advantage. I just think the coaching and the amount of expertise the Chiefs have in those critical situations is going to carry them over the top.
The been there, done it, bought the T-shirt type of thing, and hey, it certainly helps.
Professional winners.
Yep, and that's why you see certain franchises in sports and the amount of banners, trophies, rings they have. Appreciate it. Look, it was a crazy week. Obviously, it started with a bang with the Myles news right away on Monday. Here on the OBR, it was supposed to be, we started the mock draft segment, which everybody was excited about. It made great sense. Obviously, Senior Bowl ended. Again, the news cycle, takes on a life of its own, and certainly was different here this week. Luckily for you all, and luckily for us, there are plenty of things to talk about when it comes to relation with the Cleveland Browns. So make sure, of course, you are checking and following on the streaming networks, certainly over on YouTube for the OBR and certainly on Twitch. The written content is becoming fast and furious each and every day. Make sure you're checking all that out. If you got a taste of what it was like for the VIP package on Wednesday, hope you decided to go ahead and pursue on that. Certainly there will be a lot to come here as we, continue with the Garrett dalliance of will he or won't he, or will they or won't they. And then certainly combine free agency. So, you want to be plugged in. Certainly the OBR has your back. Big thanks to Pete Smith, of course, for being here. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR, brought to you by State Sharpening, Mower, Sales, and Service. Everybody enjoy the game. Have a great weekend, and we will see you Monday.